Hey, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are in our 27th season, and I want to say thank you to all of the fans that have supported us in that 27 seasons, as well as all the theist callers who have called in to present arguments. We are not convinced by any of these arguments or pieces of evidence that have been presented to us in the 27 seasons of the show. And if you are a theist and you have such an argument, call us because the show starts now. Welcome, everybody. Today is April 30th, 2023. I am your host, Jmike, and joining me today is the artist formerly known as Student Dr. Ben. I think, I know on the Talk Heathen you've been able to talk about this, but have you been able to talk about the change of the dropping of the student, so to speak, on AXP?
I have not discussed that with this lovely group yet, but I have dropped the student title. I am no longer a med student. I am my official ceremony for graduation is at the end of the month, but I finished my requirements early. So I am no longer a student, and I've added I'm just doctor. I'm no longer student Dr. Ben. So it's very weird to say that still.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like, do you want to like kind of go into like any bit of the last bit of that process? 'Cause I'm sure it was pretty relieving to get to that. Or maybe is there anything you want to kind of explain to people, like what this process was and how important this is that you're at the moment that you're at?
Yeah, so this is in the US, we do it a little bit differently than some other countries. I know in the UK and in India and other places, they have their medical degree is an undergraduate degree that's like combined with med school. So that's 6 years, and then they go to training after that. In the US, you cannot get an undergraduate degree in medicine. So you have to get a doctorate. So I did a 4-year undergrad in biology, and then it's very difficult to get in. So for the application process, I then took 2 gap years as I worked as an EMT for 2 gap years while I built up my application more to apply. And then did the application process, had interviews, all that. Like the application itself is really extensive. It's like a year-long process to apply, like taking the MCAT.
Wait, just to get a response back from the application itself?
Well, yeah. So you send in an initial application, and then you get secondary applications if you meet like the first filter criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And then after secondary applications, then you get interview invites and like all this stuff. So it's a year-long process to even get accepted to med school. And then I did 4 years of a medical degree, and then I'm about to start residency in June. So it's a super long journey. It's been a decade of work to get here. And so it's hard to explain because I can't put into words how miserable the whole journey has been.
I bet. Well, do you think that weeds out like a lot of like, or it hones in on a better group of people for the public to kind of trust in that realm because of how difficult the process and just even towards the application and all that goes?
Yeah,
and helps kind of weed all that out.
Yeah, because what I usually say is like a lot of people have the intellectual ability to go to med school and to become a doctor, but it's the persistence. Like, do you have the ability to just be miserable every day of your life for a decade and then continue that through residency and through the rest of your career? So it just attracts people that we don't mind the pain to get to where
you either really love it or you I don't know, maybe you really like you like hurt, like being in pain to yourself and you get off on that or something. I don't know. Or maybe it's that you really like to help people. But either way, we really appreciate all that, and anyone in the medical field or medical experts that have to go through that process. It sounds rigorous. And you know, it's funny because rigorous processes determining things that are true as opposed to just kind of like really crappy ones, probably not a good idea. And that's what we're on this show for, is we like rigorous processes that help weed stuff out, bad ideas, good ideas, experts in the medical field as opposed to some Joe Schmo. So we're going to, well, first, before we get into callers, I want to say that the Atheist Experience is a product of the atheist community of Austin. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism and the separation of religion and government. And we are going to just hop into calls because they're starting to stack up. I guess we'll start with Davis here in Colorado. Pronouns are he, him. Wants to talk about would I die for a lie, referring to Jesus' apostles. This is actually interesting because I had just listened to a podcast on this with some scholars that put kind of doubt to this claim that's professed. So how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How you doing?
Doing great. So you wanted to ask us if we're willing to die for a lie, or presumably you're talking about the apostles, right?
Yeah. So I actually just kind of wanted to raise up a point I see in the Gospels. Because when you look at the accounts of Jesus' life and his apostles, you see that these people all died these really horrific deaths. There's just 12 followers, and basically it's really interesting how they actually were willing to give up their lives. They were crucified upside down. They were sawed in half. Some of them were like burned, like brutal, like awful things. And it makes me wonder, like, okay, why would anybody do that if they didn't believe that they truly saw Jesus raised from the dead? If you thought that you were just hallucinating or that there's just some misunderstanding, that you saw Jesus and that his tomb was empty, why would you go through all that and knowing that people are going to revile you, they're going to hate you, they're going to persecute you, if you thought it was a lie that he was raised from the dead? That's kind of the point I wanted to raise up about Jesus.
Sure, but there's kind of an issue, I guess, in some, and maybe Ben might have different points that he wants to come in on, but for me, like, assuming that we're starting with that they would be willing to, like, let's just grant that they believed it, right? They thought that it was true. I mean, you're familiar with people that think homeopathic remedies are going to cure their cancer, right?
Sure.
And they genuinely believe it, right? They're not lying. They're not dying for a lie. They really believe it, and then they die, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem that like the psychological state of your conviction has really anything to do. It's like a separate question on whether or not you have good reason, right, to die for that, or that it was even true. So I'm just willing to grant that they were they probably believed it, but I mean, people believe things all the time and then die for them. People fly planes into buildings because they believe things.
Sure, but if you look at what incentive would they have to die for this lie? Like, everything that they would potentially gain from this is horrible. People would hate them.
Well, here's the problem. So we just said that we'd be willing to grant you that they believed it. So they're not dying for what they know to be a lie. Like, and let's take Jesus's words and that whole story. Like, if you have the promise of an afterlife, a promise that your suffering is going to end and you're going to go somewhere better, and that if you are willing to give up your life on behalf of Jesus, that you are going to be blessed in this afterlife. Like, yeah, if you absolutely believed it, you might be willing to do that. And we have examples of people that have done that. I don't know how familiar you are with something like the Heaven's Gate cult. Like, are you familiar with that story?
I'm not, but I kind of want to focus on what's written in the scriptures, because
but listen, so this is an example going to what you're talking about. So people had this reason, like, believing that the afterlife was there. And if that's what Jesus promises, and death is the gateway to getting to this better existence, it's not a wonder necessarily to say, well, why would I go through that doorway to get there? Why would I allow myself to die? They had this promise. And if they honestly believed it, like we're saying, we're willing to grant you that belief. I can think of that reason of why they would do that.
Okay. So, like, if they believed it, and you're willing to grant that, I mean, we kind of have to ask ourselves, like, why do they have such strong conviction about what they believe? Like, are they just hallucinating, or do they genuinely did all 12 of them really see the risen Christ? And did he really appear to them?
We know is that they
Because that would
believed
be a
it.
bigger
So
miracle.
yeah, but here
Right,
we have to take this a step back, right? For one thing, you're just kind of granting that this is even the case. From my perspective, it looks like some book says a thing about this, and we still have this investigation on, well, what is the content in the book actually true? Is it the case that disciples were willing to? And me and Ben have been willing to just kind of move past all of that and grant that, but there is a serious contention there, because as Dr. Bart Ehrman's pointed out, that this isn't even something that really has good evidence supporting that we know that they're of their willingness to die. This is just kind of professed through churches and sermons. It's not really backed up with any scholarly expertise or evidence. So that's one thing, but we're willing to go just to grant that and say, look, they believed it to be true. Your argument seems to rest on this. The fact that a bunch of people were convinced of this fact, that it somehow adds probability that the proposition is true. And I think that doesn't make any sense, because for the same reason that people are convinced of homeopathic remedies on probably the scale of millions of people, right? Way more than a few disciples, they're wrong and they genuinely believe it. And they might think that they have good reason to accept it. They might have saw someone take homeopathic remedies and then they didn't get cancer and they made this connection, but there was still this question of whether or not it's actually true. And it just seems like, it seems like special pleading if you're not going to grant the examples that me and Ben are giving, but somehow like look at this one case and go, there's no other case like this, when there's clearly several cases like this. And so I'm just worried that you're going to engage into special pleading.
So I see what you're saying. I mean, I definitely grant like those arguments, those examples that you give, but there's a big difference in someone saying, oh yeah, I believe that these homeopathic remedies will work, and I don't really know what the cause of death would be for.
What are you talking about? They give up their life for it.
I'm willing
to. What are you talking about? It's not different. They give up their life for it. What are you talking about? They're willing to die. They're willing to die given that experiment that they take, right? Despite medical experts like best judgment.
We kind of have to look at like human incentive, though. I mean, what would they have to gain from dying on that belief that homeopathics are the way to life, like that?
Right. So this actually points out better for what we're trying to say, because we know that people are willing to die for something smaller, like a homeopathic remedy. Like they're willing to risk their existence on something such as, I'm going to take this remedy versus going to the hospital, which is even a smaller consequence than I'm risking my life for the promise of eternity. Like if you weigh these out in terms of incentive, that is incentive. The promise of eternity, if you believe it that strongly, and we see this with our example with flying planes into towers. We see this with our example with Heaven's Gate. We see this with other religious examples of people willing to die for these promises of something better. That is enough. The motivation involved in these religious teachings is incredible. And I think we forget how powerful that motivation is for somebody who actually believes it, right?
Yeah, but like, why would they have any incentive to die if they knew that they were going to die and that's it?
I just told you
for the rest of it.
There's a payoff.
It's momentary suffering, and that's what the whole scripture says. Like you go through and it keeps talking about, well, you're going to be persecuted, but go through that because afterwards you're going to be blessed. You're going to be hated. You're going to maybe be executed. Like the scriptures are full of those examples saying you're going to have this pain, but it's okay because the people who suffer are going to be blessed. And so that is the trade-off.
Yeah, and if I believed I was going to be tortured for 3 days and become the king of everybody, and I believe that, well, one, I know what kind of change that I could do. I could end so much suffering in the world. I'd be willing to take on that 3-day kind of weekend of beating so that I become the king of literally everybody forever. Like that, like 3 days of that. Of course I'd have it. If I believe that to be true, I'm going to go through with it. but there's still this question on whether or not it's actually true. If I'm just convinced on a psychological state that it is true, there actually seemingly does seem to be a benefit, right? That's like Ben's saying, it's this very small thing that you're giving up for like eternity. You know how minuscule that one experience of like being beat or suffered would be on their own, by their own lights, because they're just going to live forever. And that'll be like, I mean, 0.000000, right? And that number will keep just getting astronomically put into the past, right? As each day increases. And I don't see why you couldn't believe that somebody's willing to die for something that pays them out a pretty handsome reward at the end of it, and that they just are gullible people. It just seems obvious to me.
I think you're kind of missing the point of why Jesus died, though. I mean, he didn't die so he could become king. He was already.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I was just using an example of like, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to get into the Jesus thing. I'm just using an example of like, if that was presented to me, but I want to stay focused on on this issue.
Okay. Well, even if you see it as just a little exchange, like, you have to realize, like, in the middle of that exchange, like, man, if you have any shred of doubt that, oh crap, what if I'm doing this and I'm about to literally die and I'll just stop existing forever? Like, you have to have absolute certainty of what you're believing. And the only way you'd have that certainty is if you truly did see it. I mean, humans all think the same way. I wouldn't do that if I thought I was going to die I wouldn't do that unless I truly saw the man and he said, here I am. This is me. I just rose. I just defeated death.
You're so focused on like, how certain they are. That's just so irrelevant, right? Like, I can be certain that I ate like pancakes for breakfast a week ago. There could be a fact of the matter that I was just wrong, right? My psychological state on how certain I am applies to the person who takes homeopathic remedies. They're extremely certain, right? Or they're more certain than the medical experts, and they're willing to die for that. So I'm failed to see like where it's not analogous, right? It just seems like you want a special plead in the case of the disciples, but you don't want to do it for any other case that we present to you. Like, it's almost like you think that there's only this one case that somebody was willing to die and be certain for it, and it would have to be true, right? Which is just nonsense.
And there's an additional layer here that I think you're ignoring, and the fact that you're kind of taking these disciples as isolated people, when it's not just their certainty in what they believe. They have trust put in other people around them, or people that, like, I mean, if Jesus was a real person, I'm not going to say whether or not he was, but let's say there was a person claiming to be Jesus and all this, and they had immense trust in this particular person. That's another layer that strengthens their certainty, whether or not like they 100% believe something. I think that trust that they're bridging with that other person takes a little bit of that need for 100% certainty off of them. Like, especially if you have people that you've had connections with. Like, I mean, I don't, like, I've never met Jmike in person, but I know enough of what I've seen from him on the internet. Like, we've talked behind the scenes like multiple times. So like, I would, have a certain level of trust in Jmike if I were to go meet him somewhere. Yeah, there's a risk that he could murder me in a back alley. I maybe wouldn't say that he'd be likely to do that because of what I know about him. But I still could be very wrong in my perception of who Jmike is. Mm-hmm. And so I think adding, like, forgetting that layer of trust amongst people who all kind of share these beliefs is something that needs to be accounted for as well. And the psychology of trust and relationships and in belief.
So where do you stand, Davis? We're going to try to move on after this, but where do you stand, and what error do you think we have on this, on our reasoning?
Well, I would just say, with regards to, putting your trust in someone, like, you have to look at why would they make up something like this? Why would people make up a story?
We didn't say that.
Somebody, and then
you have to engage. I know, but Davis, you have to engage with. But Davis, I'm getting mildly frustrated. You have to engage with what we are saying. You're not talking to Schmin and Jmike, right? You're talking to Ben and Jmike, and you're talking about a point that Spen probably said, but Spen's not here, right? Talk to us about our point. We made this point, and it seems like you keep circling into this. Why would they make it up? We've given you all the toys to play with, and we're showing you that the logic is still faulty here.
Well, that's all I would really have to say about it. It's just, I do see that people make up certain things, and yeah, they can die for them, but you have to look at the incentive, because there's people want to gain something, and
I'm not sure you listened.
Do that unless you really.
I'm not either. Could you steelman the position? Like, before we go, would you steelman me? And by steelman, I mean, would you give your best representation of what me and Ben are trying to have a counter to your position on? Could you best try to express what we are saying back to us?
Can you just summarize it a little bit? Because it was kind of long, and I was struggling to track with it.
I'm gonna drop the call, Davis, because I'm not gonna repeat it back to you. Right, you sound like a nice person, but you weren't listening, and it's just kind of disrespectful when we sit there and tell you several times, but you can't even give me like the gist of what the argument was. It sounds like you're thinking about the next thing to say rather than engaging with your interlocutor, and that's just not the way to have a conversation. But Ben, what before I get into some announcements and questions of the week and all that, what's your thoughts?
I mean, it was clear that he wasn't listening, because he went back to the incentive thing, and I've clearly spelled out what their incentive could have been as a counter, and didn't even address that. So yeah, I think we can move on.
Well, I kind of messed up. We should have gone through this at the beginning, but we're going to go through it now. We had the question of the week. So we always do, each week we do a share your experience question of the week. And the one that we had for last week was wrong answers only. Complete the sentence. If God is so powerful, why hasn't she blank? And so the top three answers that we've gotten, from number 3 being Robert English. If God is so powerful, then why hasn't she made men so they don't always put the toilet seat down? Janet Morecraft goes with, if God is so powerful, why didn't she make chocolate and ice cream have the same calorie count as broccoli? I like that. Or like burgers and stuff. That's where I'm at. If I could eat one every day, I think I would. But anyway, and Astrosci or Astroscience. If God is so powerful, why hasn't she saved the dinosaurs? That's good. I like that. So, yeah, we have a new question for the week. So I'll have Ben kind of jump in and get his response on this. But the question for this week is going to be, what do you think is the weirdest prayer God has heard? Maybe like the gas prayer from the week I was on. I think that might have been one of the weirder, more mundane type of ones. Yeah, Ben, what do you think? What's the weirdest prayer do you think God has heard?
I don't know. Maybe I bet somebody has prayed that they would find their dildo that they're missing. I don't know. I'm sure somebody has silently prayed.
My in-laws are coming. I need to find this God, please.
And to pray that their parents don't find it. Yeah. That's definitely one. I'm curious to see the responses. What do you think would be the weirdest one?
Put me on the spot. I don't know that I could top that one. I would say something like that, or I don't know. I feel like I want to walk on a tightrope here, so I probably shouldn't say it. I'll just default to the weirdest one that someone would ask for if it's going to be granted to them, and they could have asked for a lot of things, is please get me home. I don't have enough gas, like from the last caller. I would have probably used that to be like, please make everybody stop suffering. That'd be my prayer. But anyway, we will move on to callers here in just 1 second. I do want to mention that if you like to support the ACA and you like what we do, we like what you do, which is watching us. So if you want to support us, you can support us by just becoming a member. And you can do that for as little as 99 cents a month by clicking the join button below the video. And that will give you the access to special chat emojis to flex on all the people in the comments. You can also send a super chat with a question or a comment that will be read live on air. And we have a few of those, so we will get through some of those at the moment. Ben, do you want to read those off? Or?
Yeah, I can read some of these super chats. We've got James Call giving us $5 and has been a member for 6 months. It says, Dr. Venus, the juice is well worth the squeeze. And Dr. Venus is one of my nicknames on, on the internet, so you're allowed to call me that. And
I haven't heard that, so I learned something new about Ben.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's Venus.
Yeah.
And somebody asks, it's Greg Markowski giving next one for $9.99. Says, thanks for the show, and Dr. Ben, thanks for going into medicine. We need more doctors like you. Very ambitious to say that before I've even begun. I hope that I don't disappoint everybody. And then Elizaro K gives $2 and has been a member for 1 month. Says, never been here live, love ya, and it's great having you in the side chat. I'm glad that you've been here for a live, and thank you for being a member.
Yes. And we will go on to we got some calls. Look, I'm just gonna pass it to you, Ben. You have call in studio open, right?
I do.
Yeah, why don't you pick a call?
I'm curious about, I really want to talk about this miracle experience. So let's talk to Patrick in Arkansas. Patrick, I'm curious, what makes you question whether or not you've experienced a miracle?
Well, I'm a former theist, and I was baptized in the Southern Baptist Church, First Baptist Church in Cabot, and a small town in Arkansas. Anyway, last year in July, my wife had a, excuse me, this is tough talking about still.
Sure. No worries.
She had a reaction. She had a reaction to medication. It stopped her breathing, and then it stopped her heart, and she died in my arms. And she was revived by a neighbor. We were outside in our pool, and anyway, a neighbor did CPR until paramedics could get there and took her to the hospital. She was on life support for a couple of days, unconscious, and then she woke up, and she lost her eyesight. And then 3 weeks later, due to another medication, she developed clots in her lungs, and she had a pulmonary embolism. And they worked on her for 2.5 hours. I'm not kidding. They worked on her 2.5 hours. She was revived 4 times, and she was clinically dead for 90 minutes throughout that 2.5 hours. And then she was on life support, dialysis, 24-hour dialysis. They were keeping the medical equipment and the medication she was on was keeping her alive. Okay. Mm-hmm. And during that at the end of 2.5 hours, they gave her something called a clot buster. I can't remember the medical term the medicine was, and she bled out everywhere. So she was on full life support for 11 days, and she woke up, and they were able to take her off. And she ended up losing her eyesight. She had lung issues. She was in physical rehab. She was in the hospital for a couple more weeks, and then in physical rehab for a month before coming home. But there's 2 things. One, all the doctors, her cardiologists, her pulmonologists, all of her specialty doctors that she now has, and even the nurses and that we run into in the last year, call her a medical miracle. They don't know how she survived. During that 2.5 hours, I was in with our adult children outside where they were doing the life-saving measures, and one of the doctors came out and said, "We've been doing this a while." And I said, "How long have you been doing it?" And he said, 20 minutes. And I said, "Well, how much longer can you go?" And he says, "We usually give up by now." And I said, "No, you get in there." And they kept working on her. So, and she had the MRI showed very minimal brain damage. It looks, like I said, her eyesight is gone. She can see a little bit, but it's all fuzzy. She's legally blind, right? So anyway, we were talking that during the first time that she went down, she crashed, she died, and was revived. She she saw a vision of us, myself, our 3 adult children, our 2 grandchildren, and one of our grandchildren is severely disabled. He's nonverbal, non-mobile, and she described the vision as we were glowing from the inside. We provided warmth to her because at first she was in a dark area. You know, she was in dark space. She didn't know where she was. She was scared. And then we came to her, and we were what she called our most perfect self. We didn't have our tattoos. We didn't have piercings. You know, our daughters dyed their hair, and they didn't have their hair dyed. And our disabled grandson could speak to her. And we were all telling her, we need you. Don't leave us. We need you. Come back to us. And she didn't have a vision the second time, or that she doesn't remember. But, you know, I've read for 20 years. You know, I'm in my mid-40s, so I've tried Judaism, I've tried Catholicism, I've tried, you know, Methodist, you know, so I've read up on Buddhism, Hinduism. So I now consider myself agnostic, on the leaning towards atheists. But, you know, we were told that people who are under for even 5 minutes, 10 minutes, can have permanent brain damage, and people.
Well, so I get that this is a.
So anyway,
I get that this is a
yeah,
scary thing, and I apologize for everything that you've gone through, and this sounds like it's a lot to put on anybody. And see, a lot of things that when we talk about, especially something medically related like this, like you're telling the story, and I get that this is an absolutely terrifying time in your life. And
right.
It takes a toll on you for sure. As somebody who does this doesn't sound miraculous to me at all. And I think that when doctors say the phrase like this is a miracle, I think number one, we don't know for sure whether or not these doctors were religious themselves, but they might be projecting their own belief system onto the situation. But oftentimes, like colloquially, when somebody says that this is a miracle, they're saying that this is something outside of what is statistically likely, but it's not impossible. So we do know, describing your whole story, the fact that number one, she had a reaction to a medication, which tells me this is a hypersensitivity issue, went into respiratory arrest, and then with CPR was able to be resuscitated the first time, which going into that, awesome. We have, especially with a respiratory arrest, because you're going to go into that before you go into cardiac arrest. It's a while before your heart's going to stop, but you have somebody doing high quality CPR. And if you're doing high quality CPR, you can get blood to the brain. That is the number one priority. That's why we do CPR. And the first medication to be given in CPR is epinephrine, which is going to directly be a solution for the hypersensitivity reaction to begin with. So how that could have all played out absolutely makes sense to me. You're talking about life support and dialysis and things. All of that makes sense for the body's natural response to shock. And because that's what's happening here. Everybody dies from some type of shock, whether that be you don't have any more blood volume or your heart stops pumping your blood, or whether it be there's so much acid in your blood that causes multi-system organ failure, etc. Like everybody is going to die from shock. And at some point, the body prioritizes what needs to be saved. And how it does this, your blood vessels clamp down in your extremities and to all unnecessary organs. So that includes your eyes, that includes your kidneys are going to be some of the last to leave because they're helpful for clearing this acid from your blood. But at some point, if your body has to prioritize your brain or your kidneys, it's going to prioritize your brain. And even with doing CPR for long term, you're only putting enough pressure on the heart to move blood basically to the brain and back. You're just maintaining this circulation. So how we see like these visions, like even if you don't have permanent brain damage, you have an anoxia or lack of oxygen in the brain to cause certain parts of it to not work as well in the moment because you're trying to prioritize the things that are going to keep you alive. And so you can get some interesting visions and things because your circuitry of connecting your senses to the parts of your brain that receive that and interpret it are not communicating properly because your brain's just trying to survive it all. So I get why this is frightening. I get why it can be seen as a miracle, but to me, it's not so much as like I'm not even close to going to a place to acknowledge that it would be supernatural. I'd say it's impressive that the statistics were in your favor that day, and I'm very happy that they were. But this is something within very unlikely, but still possible statistical likelihood. And I don't know if Jmike has anything that you want to say. I just kind of
I'm not going to pretend like I'm going to follow that up, but no, let's let Patrick go ahead. I think you guys are perfectly fine.
My wife and I joke that she's the luckiest unlucky person on the planet. To have 2 minutes and basically stop her life, and then on the first time she went down, our neighbor was supposed to be somewhere and something happened and she was late 30 minutes, and that's when she heard us yelling for help. And she was a nurse, and she is a nurse, and she was there. Also, interesting that you said epinephrine. That's one of the first things. We thought she was having an allergic reaction because she has allergies, and we have EpiPens. And I injected that right when she passed.
See, that's a factor. That's a factor that being mentioned. Like I figured, like either somebody had given her epi for the allergic reaction, or they would have done it during CPR. And like, that's one of the key things that's going to save you. And if she got that really quickly, you have that working very fast. So like, when I hear people talk about medical miracles, this is something that like, I want to take a step back because there's a lot, especially from a layperson's perspective, that are factors that we don't really think about. Like, how much does this really matter? And from what we know about things like CPR, we know that even though CPR in general has a low likelihood of success, we do know that high quality CPR, if you do CPR well, your chances of survival go up incredibly. The same thing if you have someone ACLS trained that can give epinephrine, your chances of survival go up even further. So like maybe, and I can't say for sure because I don't know the exact circumstances, but perhaps like one of the biggest factors in this is that early intervention, and maybe that caused the cascade further on to be more favorable. And I don't know. And something else, like there's a lot of variables here that we could, instead of going to a supernatural being, we could just say that I'm buffering a little bit. I don't know if you all can still hear me. But we can go to that this is just an unknown. Like the reason why this person survived that long is just something that medically we don't have a good reason to explain that yet, and it requires further study. But yeah, either way, I'm not inclined to say that this is supernatural at all.
No, well, yeah, I hear you, and I understand, and everything had to come together perfectly that day, you know, the first time, and then the second time. Second time, she was still recovering from the first time, and
right. But so you're looking at this from you're looking at this from an N of 1, right? Because you're seeing like this is a one-time thing, because this is what are the chances that my person is going to survive this one time. But you're forgetting all of the people who've died and their CPR was not successful. Yes, and now this was the rolling of the dice that was favorable, and you were maybe N equals a few thousand people, and you just happen to be that statistical anomaly.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, and it happened to her twice. You know, it twice in 3 weeks apart, and so I look at it as a miracle, not in the sense of supernatural, because I look at it, she's a strong woman. She's been through 10 years of cancer. You know, she survived a cancer that her brother didn't survive. It was a genetic cancer. And so she's strong. And I have other stories like that with family members who survived the odds. And it's just, I think, a combination of genetics, a combination of people say the will to live, the body's will to live. But she asked herself, like, why me? Why did this happen to me to begin with? Like her talking about herself. And then what about, these shootings all over the place? We had another one today or yesterday, it just, why did some people live and some people die? And it's like chaos. And I lean towards, when people say it's a miracle and that there's a super being, some invisible super being working on lives, that sounds great and all. I mean, I want to believe, like the old X-Files thing, I want to believe, but I think it takes away from the survivors, the people who it affects, the people who strive and thrive.
Sure.
Beyond.
Yeah, because I had a buddy.
From the
real quick, Patrick. I want to, if I can, just real quick, I want to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like a buddy of mine, I went to an atheist convention in April like last year, and a buddy of mine got to Captain Dadpool got to get up on stage, and it was really cool watching a friend in the community get a following that he does, and then hosting this kind of, or like headlining, this type of convention. And he mentioned this story about being in a hospital and seeing his newborn, get birthed, and hearing like. Had this reflection, like, why am I, lucky, right? Or like, why, what about other people that weren't so lucky, or a situation where,
right,
you lose your kid. And what I think is like, I can't do what Ben does with the smart big brain on Ben, but what I can do is kind of think of this as layman as I possibly can, which is that to me, it's going to be a miracle if we didn't have these types of statistical anomalies. Like, that would be really weird if we didn't find these people in these cases with these like extremely unlikely events occurring. It just seems like if you know stuff about inferential statistics, that those events are going to occur in much smaller numbers, but there's always going to be an agent within those numbers asking themselves like, well, why did this happen to me? Right? That's just going to be kind of constitutive of what goes with the whole fact that it could happen at all. It's almost like similar to like the anthropic principle, not like looking at it in this way of like, well, of course, you would expect, this outcome given the statistics. And I don't find it to, like you said, among this chaos and all this stuff, it actually seems to be the way that the natural world operates. And that, I'm someone that thinks if we didn't have those occurrences and somehow we're devoid of those statistical improbabilities, like that in and of itself would seem like a miracle to me. If that makes sense. I don't know if that's a great point or anything to what's going on. That's where I'm like, it seems like this is what we would expect. Yeah. It just seems like you would expect these events to occur. And by the way, not to take away from your what you went through or anything like that. I'm just because I'm glad that you guys have come out of this on a more favorable side than what it could have been.
Yeah.
But just on like the general kind of scale thing, it's like what you expect, unfortunately. It seems like, but I don't know.
Right.
And I'm gonna.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
if you need to let me go, that's okay.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna move on to other callers, but I didn't know if you and Ben wanted to kind of hash anything out before we go on.
Well, Ben.
Well, you can always if you ever watch one of the other shows on the ACA, I'm on Talk Heathen more frequently than I am here. So if you want to call onto that show when I'm on and continue this discussion a bit more, or if you think of anything else you left out or anything else that you have questions about, you can call over there and I'd be happy to pick this up.
Okay, wonderful. I just found your channel on YouTube today, actually, and I was hoping to talk to somebody about it. This is just really interesting. My mind's blown. Everybody we talked to, the mind's blown about my wife's case. It's been a struggle. We're happy that we're on the other end. But for me, I'll say this was a miracle in the sense that, she survived 1 in a millionth, twice, on the science side. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or is that?
I mean, like I see what I see the I see the thought process in your head. At least I see what you're saying. Like I get how the gears are turning in your head. It makes sense. But I think, yeah, actually, I would just let Ben chime in, because this is your thing. It's like sitting next to Forrest, talk about biology stuff. I'm like, I'm not even gonna fucking pretend like I can even get to that level. So I'll just
yeah, and I think too, like statistically speaking, even though chances are low from surviving cardiac arrest, keep in mind, well, number one, the initial one was initially a respiratory arrest, which is easier to reverse because you can correct the respiratory component. And then the only reason she went into that cardiac arrest the first time was because of the respiratory arrest, which was fixed. So I don't know the exact stats on that situation, but just for anyone going into cardiac arrest, I think the stats are, if you've had CPR, it's like a 10% chance that you'll survive after cardiac arrest. Granted, like that's usually with a good amount of disability afterwards. And of course, if you multiply this out for each time that this person went into cardiac arrest, sure, your chances get lower and lower, but it's not even like a 1 in a million chance, especially with the fact that she had such early intervention. Taking it into like a 10% is a low chance, but it's still like better than I think you're granting it. So.
Right. Okay.
All right, Patrick. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Have a good one, and yeah, man, just hug the people around you and love them, because you've had experience I've never had, and give a hug for everybody for me, and cherish people around you, because the world sucks in a lot of ways. So we appreciate the call, Patrick, and we will move on to another call, but I do want to talk about the podcasts and Patreon for a moment. We have a channel that houses all of the shows on the ACA in audio podcast form. You just need to visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. And there you can listen to all the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen Truth Wanted, Nonprofits. And you can also support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/Patreon. AXP. So let's go ahead with a third call. I'm looking at Trevor in Michigan. Let's talk about burden of proof and biblical interpretations. Pronouns are he, him. How you doing, Trevor?
How you doing, man?
Doing good.
Yeah, so I'm an atheist, and my dad, I was raised in a Christian household, but I never really subscribed to that. I always just kind of went my own way. But me and my dad still have debates about it. And so I sent him a Bible verse, because you know how they always say you have to take the Bible as the Bible, and you have to take the Bible as what it is. Well, I sent my dad this Timothy verse, and it was it said something along the lines that no woman should hold no power or authority over men, and that in fact
First
should
Timothy.
remain quiet.
Yeah, First Timothy. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then he automatically just goes to oh, you're just taking it out of context, and I'm just see, I mean, if you have to go get somebody else's interpretation from somebody else of the Bible, then
this isn't
even a thing.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing, and this might get into the more philosophical weeds, and I'll try not to make it that, but this is a problem that I have that I've heard in discussions, and then over time I've really realized how much of a problem this is that, I mean, look, so I use kind of Proverbs 3 as an example. Lean not on your own understanding, but that of the Lord's. I could just, tell somebody that I think that verse is interpreted as don't do any critical thinking. Just screw that shit. Give that, God's gonna do that for you. But a Christian's never gonna they're not gonna like that interpretation. They're gonna say that I went wrong somewhere. And I think these types of examples, maybe you just do an in-house debate, right? A Christian versus a Christian, and them disagreeing on a verse, whatever it is. There's this idea about a principle of interpretation that you take, right? So if I want to be correct on what God means, I need to have a principle that aligns with what God intended, right? Right, because the whole point is that we should interpret it as close to God's intentions as possible, and that's how we're gonna
How do you figure that out?
Well, yeah, exactly. So this is precise. Well, so here you go. So this is exactly what I'm going to get to is that think about, and this has been used. This example has been used by somebody, and I greatly credit them for this because I think this is extremely a good point. Like think about how we know like what somebody means in your life, like your mom or your dad or whoever. Generally, you have background information about that speaker. You know a lot about that speaker, and so you can construct a hypothesis when they say something to you of like what you think they intended. So, for example, if your mom says something to me, and I'm like, "Wow, your mom's being kind of mean," and you're like, "Oh no, that's actually you interpreted that incorrectly. She actually really likes you. You just don't have enough background information about the speaker, and so you're going to have a hard time ruling in or ruling out the right kind of intention that she had behind it." And that makes sense that you know it better than I do, and you can interpret better than I can because you know your mom, you have background information, you understand her intentions, how she uses words, maybe even her body language, right? All of this gives you a better analysis on how to interpret it. But think about the text of the Bible, right? If this principle is true, that what should back up our interpretation is knowing the character, like the speaker, and knowing what those divine utterances mean. Well, how do we know anything about God? Trevor, I'd ask you, where do we get the information from about the attributes of God? Where does that come from?
Well, right. So that's the big like whole story.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm asking you, like, what would the Christian say?
Oh, well, usually they would go, oh, well, it says it in the New Testament and how Jesus
there you go.
was.
There you go. But remember,
Jesus Christ in the Old Testament Bible don't add up.
But remember, and like this is, and I'll go off of my huge diatribe. This is a thing I think is a massive problem for any scripturally based text. So you hit it on the head, right? It's in order to get the attributes or intention of God, we have to go to the text. But the problem was deciphering which interpretive principle we should use from the text in the first place. So we just did this really weird loop back to this thing where now the interpretive issue can be brought up on a higher level. How do we interpret that those are the right attributions of God as opposed to the interpretation of these other attributions of God? And you don't actually get background information about the speaker. So what it seems to conclude is that there isn't any way that you can independently justify the principle that you use for interpretation because you have no other tool to gain access to God's intentions. Thus, you're not justified in any interpretation you have. That to me is an immense problem for anything scripturally based, because they're going to use the exact thing that caused the problem in the first place. But yeah, sorry, that's my rant.
Exactly.
Maybe present that problem to your dad or whatever, and see how he thinks about that. And just say, all I'm asking for you is to justify your principle, and he'll probably say the Holy Spirit. And then you say, well, Christians have the same tool as you do with the Holy Spirit, and if you disagree, then the non-believer like me and Ben are sitting there going, well, I guess the Holy Spirit's either a fucking liar or it just doesn't exist, right? Like it's one of those two, it seems like. So, yeah. But,
so I asked him about the Holy Spirit one time, and I was like, so do you believe in ghosts, right? Because essentially that's what the Spirit is. And he's like, oh, I believe in one ghost. I'm like, well, if you believe in one ghost, doesn't that imply that there could be multiple ghosts, right? I mean, like, how is there just one?
Well, I mean, yeah, well, you don't have to worry about like a contained form of reasoning on some of these beliefs, I think. But, you know, that's I think you're going to get this weird leaking out of kind of things. And that's not to be like dismissive to the character. It's just like if you start out believing that magic is kind of an acceptable answer for solving some issue, you'll probably continue to use that tool and make the same mistake, you know, throughout the course. But Ben, I mean, yeah, I don't know. What are your kind of with interpretation and these disputes, whether in-house Christian, atheist Christian, what's your kind of your?
I don't have anything different than what Jmike has already said, because it's a problem with like, how do you validate anybody's interpretation? How do you, and I really like that example that you used about like knowing the character. And of course, that's where we get into this weird thing, because you'll have priests that will say, well, but that's why I'm here to tell you the interpretation, because
Yeah.
I know the character better than you do, so therefore trust me.
Yeah.
And that's where we get into that. And so people will say, well, it's not me. My priest or my pastor is the one that knows more than I do.
My imam and the scholars and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that problem it surfaces at that level, right? Because presumably if they're the ones of authority, then they would just be able to tell us the interpretive principle and how it's independently justified, because it's not like this problem just doesn't exist for them. It's precisely the problem,
Well, and what specific branch of Christianity does your dad come from?
So he converted to non-denominational.
Okay, so this is actually a great example, because
mega church.
Yeah, well, because if you take this and you say, because you can follow this weird train of like, oh, well, I don't know as much about the character of God and what he would want, so it's my pastor. And then like that pastor might say, oh, well, it's this other pastor, whatever. And you keep going back this chain, and where at least with the Catholic Church, them and the Orthodox Church can be like, well, but we're appealing to the original disciples and like the original teachings,
church fathers.
But you get into an even weirder place with these Protestant faiths, because they at some point decided that their convictions were different. And so then how do you validate your different? You can't follow that train anymore, because you can't even go back to the original like church, because they weren't Protestant. So like whose revelation, like within that, did Martin Luther like have more information about God than everybody else? You run into these same problems that whole way.
Right. And then, another issue I find is that like you have like the Jewish people that don't believe in Jesus Christ. You have Roman Catholics who believe praying to Mother Mary. And then you have like people like my dad who don't believe, who say you only pray to the one God. And it's just like, who's right in all of these beliefs? It's just kind of like a giant merry-go-round of just, no, I'm right.
Well,
I'm right.
Trevor, here's a thought for you, right? You can ask your dad this, or whoever, just be like, hey, do you think God is infallible? Like, meaning like when he intends for something, he's going to get that outcome. So like he wants a really dank ice cream. He's getting that dank ice cream, right? He's not going to fail at getting achieving or obtaining that intention. And most theists, this is already baked into their view. They'll say yes. And so just kind of ask, but does God intend for everybody to understand and come to his word? Now, if there's yes, you shouldn't fail, right? There shouldn't be because all you have to do now is just say, well, look at all these denominations. So now I can create an argument that, well, if there's a God that does intend for everybody to understand, but the data shows that nobody understands, then the conclusion is God failed, and now we get a contradiction. An infallible God who can't fail failed, right? It also just seems that if you just answer yes, he doesn't want everybody to come to it. He wants some people, maybe the elect or whatever. Well, then God's seemingly the author of confusion at that point, right? It's just intended to confuse people. And you just don't really see like which route, is more favorable for you. But anyway, Trevor, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say, or Ben, but I want to try to speed through some of the calls. Okay. Yeah. Well, we appreciate your call, Trevor.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. We will go on to some other announcements real quick, because this is actually, I saw in the live chat. I snooped in the live chat for a second. Someone mentioned Joe Pesci. So we have merch, and this month is special. We are bringing back the top 3 designs as rated by the fans for the month of May only. If you missed out on getting one of these before, here's your chance to get them, but hurry. They're only around till the end of the month, and I'm hoping that I'm not overlapped on May and did something. So take that. Hopefully, maybe show crew cam, and maybe if I get like a thumbs up here or something like that, like a thumbs down, thumbs up. Shout out to crew cam. We can do that. Yeah, thumbs midway. Okay, well, here we go. All right. Either way, you can, if you so please, to support us, and we very much appreciate it. You can visit tiny.cc/merchaca to get your merch, and you can use the discount code favorites for a 10% discount. Finally, we want to send a big thank you to the crew and put them back up on the board. So now this time we can get a nice love for them. There we go. Yay. And so they put this show together every week, apply all the filters to make me look presentable for my face, and I won't scare the audience. So we greatly appreciate the crew. Let's go ahead. I guess we have a theist on the line. So we got John in Canada. I think I know who this is. The necessity of God for morality. And if you're a theist, by the way, please call. We'd like to have a lot more theist callers. So please do call.
Hello, Jmike. Hello, Dr. Ben. How are you?
Hey. How
Hi,
you
John.
doing?
Doing well. Dr. Ben, I'd like to congratulate you on your promotion to doctor.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, I'll let it tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
God is very necessary for morality in the lives of young people.
Okay. It's God's necessary for morality, as you said?
Yes.
Okay. World A baby is thrown off a building and God exists in that world. Okay. Did something wrong happen?
Yes.
Great. World B, a baby's thrown off a building and there's no God in that world. Did something wrong happen?
You throw a baby off a cliff is wrong, no matter what.
Okay, so God isn't necessary for morality then? That seems like the quickest debunk of a point I think I've ever had on the show.
You see, here's what you don't understand. But many young people have...
Well, no, hold on, John. Go back real quick. I want to make sure I heard you right, because maybe there's a chance I misheard you. Did you agree with me that in World B, something wrong occurred? Something that ought not occur? Like throwing the baby off the building, despite there being no God?
Yes.
Did you agree with me that it was wrong?
Yes, I just said that.
Yeah, so God wasn't necessary in that world to establish the intrinsic action of baby suffering being thrown off of a building, right? This is the weird thing, because like if you had said no, like nothing wrong went, then I would, you'd be consistent in terms of saying God's necessary for it, but at the expense of not caring about what happens to the baby. Like none of that matters. It's just if God sprinkles like a little metaphysical salt and pepper on it, and it's like, okay, now it's bad, right? You have to like have this extrinsic type of forcing onto the action. But you didn't say that. You said something wrong occurred in the world where God doesn't exist. So I don't like, honestly, I kind of want to drop the call. I'm not going to lie, but I'm going to go to Ben because your point has already been dismantled, but you can continue. I just want to point out, just so that we're clear and concise, your argument's done. Finito. Bye. Adios.
Okay.
But Ben, feel free to continue.
No, I want to hear John's response to that.
I'm not trying to say that God decides what's right and wrong. I'm saying that God is necessary to keep people on the right path. Because a lot of people have sworn that it wasn't until they found religion that they started became productive citizens. Because many of them people were young juvenile delinquents, then they found religion.
Sounds like now you're changing the claim. Sounds like, John, now it sounds like you're changing the claim from, because I think I asked, I mean, again, I'm always willing to say I made a mistake, but I think if you go back and listen, I asked, so you're saying God is necessary for morality? And you said yes. But now it seems like you're saying people believing in God is necessary in order for them to do things that you consider good or bad. That seems like a change from what you said.
It's not a change. It's the reality.
Yeah, John, can people do good things for bad reasons?
Repeat the question?
Can people do good things for bad reasons?
People do good things for bad reasons. Like what?
Yeah. So like, let's say I decide that I'm going to go feed the homeless because I'll steal this from Forrest because Roland the Closet Goblin told me that would be a good thing to do. I still did the good thing, right? Even though Roland probably doesn't exist, and that's kind of a stupid reason for me to go feed the homeless.
You watch your mouth, Ben. You watch your freaking mouth.
Yeah, man. What I'm trying to tell you.
Right.
This.
Answer my question, John. Can people do good things for bad reasons?
Good things for bad reasons? Yes. And people can do the right thing for the wrong reason.
Right. So like young people, so like you're giving the example of young people that were juvenile delinquents that found a religion
Yeah.
and then used that as motivation to do good things and to stop doing bad things, that they don't necessarily need that reason to have made them do the good things. Maybe if you swapped in something else, like let's say they, I don't know, instead of finding a religion, they decided that they wanted to go back to school and get a career. They wanted to like open a business or something. And they learned that in order to engage with society at that level, in order to be entrusted with opening a business and going to school, that they would have to change what they were doing and interact with society better in ways that we would call moral. Right. So then their motivation, even though this might not be considered a bad reason, but it's not the only reason why you could change your ways. So I actually think that's probably better incentive, because that's an actual demonstrated goal and reward that they could have. Whereas I found a religion, but I believe this to be true, and I'm going to do good things. They're both good things at the end of the day. But you can do things for your own intrinsic joy and benefit, and then somebody else benefits on the flip side from it, even though that wasn't your intent, wasn't to necessarily do the good thing, right? I maybe word saladed a little bit, but do you see why your claim doesn't really stand?
I live in Canada. You live in the United States. But from what I'm understanding,
that's irrelevant.
I am answering your question. I am seeing riots taking place all over your country because people no longer believe in God.
Okay, so you're
not believing in their own happiness.
So you're committing a fallacy. You're committing a fallacy here. So I'm going to explain what your fallacy was. So you said that this thing happened. So you're saying that riots happened, and then you're saying that was caused by people being less religious. So something happened after something else, and these two things might not actually be related. You're just claiming that because one happened after the other one, that therefore that first thing caused the second thing. And that's a fallacy. That's bad reasoning, right? Because I can relate any two scenarios together. And this is the same thing we see with vaccine arguments. And people will say that vaccines cause autism because it's a correlation maybe without a causation. And number one, I don't even have a correlation at all with this. So we're not even at that first step there. It's just you made a claim that something happened first and then this happened after. Therefore, they're related. And you can't really do that.
Okay. Okay, do you agree with me? There was a time where there wasn't so much riots in the United States. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I don't know the statistics.
You don't know. So why do you explain all the riots? How do you explain all the riots that are taking place? Please tell me. I want your true opinion.
Well, you're the one that has to demonstrate. Yeah. You claim that the riots were increasing in number, so you have to demonstrate the data that suggests that.
John, this movie, I've picked up on this a lot more recently with people. It bothers me. I don't think people are doing this dishonestly. I think in a lot of cases they are. When you make a claim about these riots are due to people not believing in God, if you ask a question to somebody, well, how do you do this? Like, I'm just assuming like some personal incredulity there, or that you're trying to like just shift the burden, because what Ben thinks about it is just fucking irrelevant to your claim and substantiating the claim. It's that Ben's thoughts or attitude towards the proposition play no role in whether or not you can actually demonstrate this, right?
And real quick, I wanted to clarify, just in case people decide to clip things out later, vaccines do not cause autism. And I was using that as an example of the logical fallacy that was going on. So do not clip that out and say that I said something, because that's not true.
Yeah, it does seem a little post hoc. I mean, John, what do you have? Because I feel like we're going to get into this and not get anywhere if we're not going to get you to focus. So just at least focus. What evidence or argument do you have that's going to support the claim that people are becoming immoral or
Okay.
riots are happening because they don't believe in God.
Okay,
Because
what is the
I
riot, though?
just want to say, by the way, 27 seasons of this show. I mean, none of the hosts have formed or started riots. None of our viewers, I believe, have. I'm pretty in depth with the community, the atheist community in general, and yeah, this just sounds like kind of bullshit.
Okay. Well, were there lots of riots in the 50s? Answer that question.
Me answering a question is just you failing at the task that's set before you, right? If I'm a teacher and you're supposed to do a test and you come up to me, you just start asking me questions. I'm gonna say, sit the fuck back down and do the test. What are you asking me questions for? You're the one who's supposed to pass this and show me that you are capable. So sit down. Don't ask me a question. Don't ask Ben a question. Give evidence for your claim, or I'll be happy to drop the call. I mean, look, I'm happy to show you wrong twice in one call. I'm very happy to do it.
You're very happy to do what?
To show you that you don't know what you're talking about 2 times in a row. So go ahead with your evidence.
Okay. And ever since critical race theory has become a reality, people have been taught that white people are responsible for slavery and that black people are entitled. And because of that,
how did we get to this?
Where am I? Your question. You asked me to make my point.
That's not evidence. Going to a tangent is not evidence for the claim you already made. You were just talking about riots and religion, and we're still waiting to understand what the connection between these are and what your evidence is that that's even a problem. And then you just go off on a tangent. Can you focus to one claim and back up that one claim before moving on to more claims?
Focus on the claim that the like the people that are doing these riots or that people are going away from God or doing bad is because of God. But I'm going to point out that like the prison system, or if you just polled like the people in the riots, probably majority religious. You'll probably find a very small amount of atheists in there, if any.
And how do you know that?
Because just statistically, that's likely to be the case, right? There's statistics to show, just in general, more people are religious. But too, I mean, if you want to talk about the prison system, I mean, you can look up the data yourself. I mean, you'd be pressed to find a lot of atheists that are just chilling in prison. But point being is that me answering a question is irrelevant to you actually substantiating the claim, right? So I don't need to keep adding it's probably a fault for myself. I shouldn't add anything. I should just keep you focused on answering this. So I'm going to be clear. Do you have anything or not? Just be honest. It's because I don't think you do. I'm not even convinced you've thought past this point yet.
I want to live in a better society, don't you?
That's not evidence for the claim. Last chance, John. Last chance. You ask me a question or tell me about your feels. I don't care. Give me the evidence, right? The evidence is indifferent to the feels and questions. So just present the evidence or I'm going to hang up. I just have you know what? I'll make a novel prediction. I'll give you evidence. I predict in this call, you won't give evidence. And when I ask you this question and you don't do it, that's a novel prediction, predictive expectation that comes true. And it's evidence for the case that you're dishonest. So I'm going to ask you, do you have evidence?
I am not being dishonest.
Yeah. So novel prediction, predictive expectation, not getting a response, talking about himself, feels, questions. I'm not interested in all that. So John, please, you call a lot. We like you to call. We like to talk to you, but for fuck's sake, please come with something that's like substance. Like you just say stuff. And then when you get to the point, I've noticed, this is the thing I've noticed about you. When you get to the point where you haven't thought about it at that point, that's usually at the point of evidence. You start asking questions or make remarks to people. Please, next time call in, just give a case. It's really frustrating trying to like get you to spill out something that you should already have. So we will try to take the rest of the calls if we can, but man, I just wish we wouldn't have wasted as much time, assuming that he was going to give us evidence. So we're going to go to Icon in Canada. Can we measure how reasonable it is to believe in God or gods over time? Pronouns are he, him. How you doing, Icon?
I'm good. How are things with you guys?
Doing good.
Awesome. So it's just something I've been thinking about for a long period of time. And like, I'm a huge numbers guy. I like attaching numbers to things, but religions, it's really difficult to get numbers attached to them. So my thought process here was, if we measure reasonableness over time and just assume that at year 0, it was 100% reasonable to believe in a God or gods. And then based on adding time to that and then discoveries to that, how does that impact how reasonable it was to believe, or it is to believe in gods over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't want to, since I was just giving a diatribe to John. Ben, do you want to go?
Well, it's an interesting thought experiment. I guess I have questions because how do we assign for any amount of discoveries, or which discoveries, like how do we assign what percentage of reasonability is changed based on certain discoveries? And like you probably assign whatever numbers to any of them, but it's going to ultimately, of course, be subjective in how you do that. And I don't know by what metric we're going to be able to assign these percentages. So I'd be curious, like how we would design this thought experiment to work. Like, do you have thoughts on how you'd structure it?
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. The percentages would be subjective. And so my thought process was just to start it, even if the discoveries had like a 1% impact. Not that I think that's a true number based on a discovery, but even just getting them on the board, and then you can have a discussion about how much of an impact it would have. I mean, I'd assume the chart would look something, if you're starting at year 0 to 2000, I assume the chart would be like at 100% and probably be pretty consistently there until like the 15 or 1600s, when discoveries start coming in. Like the early 1600s is when we discovered the sun is the center of the solar system rather than the Earth being the center of the solar system. So even if that was just like a 1% impact on how reasonable it was to believe in a God, like when we found fossils, when we discovered that it's possible for animals to go extinct and that animals existed before we did, like I think these have huge impacts on how reasonable it is to believe in a God. And I think the discussion needs to be around, I think we can plot all these things and then have the discussion around how much of an impact that would have on reasonableness.
I think it's hard for me to answer a lot of this in the sense that I'm concerned on how much analytic and contemporary philosophy has muddied the waters on it being reasonable, given the literature. And when you go in through those, you look at that, it's going to be presumed to be more reasonable to accept those views. And a lot of that might be based on like deductive arguments or considerations on like theoretical virtues, but there's still this question on like whether or not that's really even reasonable, or whether or not there was something faulty in the language that's being used by the philosopher. So for me, this is like really like muddy because I just wonder how much influence in my opinion, the wrong way philosophy has aided kind of theism up until recently, where if you look at like Phil paper surveys, it's like 76 or 78% of professional philosophers are atheists. So I don't know. For me, it feels like it's so context specific that I'm confused on how you would even do it. But Ben, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe a fun. I say this kind of jokingly. I often call it like mental masturbation. Like it sounds like a fun mental masturbation session, like where you and your friends can talk about how I would assign reasonableness to all this stuff, and like, it's like definitely fun to think through a lot of that stuff. But
like something huge like evolution, or something huge like the fact that we're not the center of the universe, like these would have significant impact. Like when these I think the biggest impact was the discovery of evolution, and the fact that animals can go extinct, and that those things people were finding in the soil weren't devil's toenails, they were fossils and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, I mean,
to me that would be like 100%. But yeah,
I mean, it's something fun to think about.
Have that huge impact.
It's fun to think about. I guess I don't know. My personality is like I'm not much of a philosopher. Like, I mean, stats are fun to think of, but it's not really my sphere of things that I like to think about a lot of time. I'm very utilitarian in like how I think through this kind of stuff. So I think it'd be interesting
to
like
attach numbers to this conversation.
I don't think it's possible to attach, like it'd be very difficult to have a consistent like way of deciding what these numbers were. And
how could you, if
I don't think
they're subjective, and then we have a big giant pool of the data that we can't go ask and talk to. They're,
so it just seems it seems fun. I don't see what we're getting like with this discussion other than some mental exercise, I guess, and just like some thought.
Yeah, I'm also on a different. I'm also on a different side of it, Icon. It's just like might be just where my focus is. Not to say it's not a good question or something. I might be missing part of the point, but for me, I'm really just focused on, given like the case or the person I'm talking to, or what's being presented to me, as if it's reasonable or rational. Over time type of stuff is interesting, but it's kind of similar to me as the utility talk. Like, oh, well, societies are better if they're more religious. When people call in about that stuff, I'm immediately like, I don't want to talk about this. One, I don't agree, but two, it's like so irrelevant to at least what my kind of inquiry is, which is like, why the fuck should I think that this is true? Like, that's my biggest concern on the topic, and not the kind of peripheral stuff. The only peripheral stuff I care about
is... I'm at the point... I'm past the point of like wondering why they think it's true, and I'm tack down some ways to.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm more targeted at the people who are completely on the fence about it and just haven't spent a minute thinking about it once. Like, the idea is this is an exhibit in my theist escape room, or theism escape room. You walk in.
And by the way, I don't want to fault you on it or anything. I felt that came off negative. I appreciate you when you said. I've kind of gone past that. I kind of get that now, in a sense.
Yeah, because maybe I should have started by saying that, because I'm not trying to convince people of theism. I'm trying to show them that even though it was 100% reasonable to believe in a God in year zero, now it's not reasonable. It's not a position you could reasonably take.
Yeah, and I kind of tackle this thing in a similar way but different. I mean, in terms of like explaining the data and having processes, like maybe it's causal processes. I don't know whether you talk about evolution or something like elements formed in stars or something. There's nowhere in the hypothesis that you have to start adding this foreign ontology to it. And I think, kind of going on what you're saying, like in the past, a paper or something gets brought up in the air, you might assume that there's like angel hands lifting up the thing and taking them away, and that might have been very reasonable. But I agree with you. You would see this decline because you start to realize, given our methodology, that the kind of God thing or the divine stuff or the supernatural stuff, it's an idle wheel for when talking about explanatory power, right? It's just sitting there idle. It's not adding to explanatory power. It's not adding to explanatory breadth and depth. And so we should just kind of shave it off. And so I see where you're coming from in that sense. The number thing is where I'm like, oh, fuck, I don't know how I could ever imagine doing that project. But it is an interesting project, like thought-wise, to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate the conversation, guys.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll go back and listen to what you said and make sure I fully understood it, because I feel like I brain farted and maybe missed something crucial there. But yeah, thank you for calling, Icon. We appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks. Have a great day, guys.
Yeah, have a good one. Yeah, getting towards the end of the show, I'm gonna blame my fogginess, even though I probably have no excuse.
I blame Roland.
You blame Roland? Yeah, there you go.
I blame Roland.
But no, you can't do this now. You were all talking about how Roland probably doesn't exist. Come on. Come on. What are you like? You're not a true Roland.
I'm not a
true Roland believer. All right, we're gonna go.
True Roland.
Yeah, no true Roland. I do want to take this last call if we can, or if we get through this quick, I guess we can maybe get through the other two in the queue, but don't want to make any promises. We have another theist, and if we don't get to it, I apologize. I want to try to get these last two if we can, so we'll see how this goes. We got Adam in Saudi Arabia. pronouns are he, him, and wants to know, why doesn't atheism make everything ultimately meaningless? Do you want to elaborate on that?
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Just first time on the show. I just like randomly came up on your show. I'm just interested into just to get your thoughts on it. I am a theist, a Muslim from Saudi Arabia, and I have to be very, very frank when I say that I'm not the strongest. I'm not a fundamentalist. I do think about the possibility that I am wrong, that other perspectives are true. But when it comes to atheism, what I find unattractive is the fact that I can't get away from this idea that if I accept an atheistic worldview, then everything is ultimately meaningless. There is no meaning to anything, no purpose or value to anything, and that's kind of a very hard pill to swallow. And I think there's
I don't think me or Ben see it that way at all, though. I mean, like, there isn't something like in the world like as a property of meaning that imbues itself onto stuff. Like that to me is kind of a strange thing. I have like two issues. I'm gonna pass it to Ben. My first issue is that I don't. I have a problem with this. Like, and I don't think theists are thinking this in this way. But when you talk about it wouldn't ultimately have a purpose, how I hear that is my dog, my mom, my cat, not good enough for me unless something forces an intrinsic value onto it, which is so strange to me. Like, I don't need mom plus or dad plus, right? I just need mom. I just need dad. I don't need this like plus objective like meaning or purpose. I don't see what any of that's doing that isn't already there in the vanilla form, right? That's just like, why do I need the mod pack or the DLC? I don't really get why that's required. But two, I think there's a consequence to this view that a friend of mine had pointed out. I don't know if this necessarily works, but I had discussed this with them the other day, and I was like, yeah, I mean, this has kind of been my thought as well. If everything has a purpose, would we agree that then that means that there's a reason for all events, right? If everything has a purpose, we can now say, we can kind of extrapolate that out to everything has a reason, right? Right? Do you agree?
Are you asking me or okay?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
I'm following your logic. Okay.
Yeah. So if we say everything has a purpose, we're saying every event has a reason or a purpose. Right? Okay. Now, if we say every event if we're saying every event has a purpose or a reason, that means there are no events that don't have a reason or a purpose, right?
Okay.
There are no events that don't have a purpose or reason. Now, fill the blank in with like the Holocaust or baby torture. Under this view, it has a purpose. It has a reason. But that seems clearly like strange. No, there is no purpose for that. That would make it a good thing. If we said there's a reason that takes place, that means that evil thing is what should be done, right? There's a reason, there's a purpose. It ought to occur. That is a horrible consequence. To me, it sounds like when you have the spiritualists, like everything has a purpose, what they're saying is every event has a reason. So there aren't any events that don't have reasons. So fill in the blank. Now, anything that you have, there's a reason for that, or let's say purpose better, because that's what we're going with. And I just find that very strange.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a purpose that babies suffer.
When it comes to like evils, I think like most kind of religions would provide some sort of theodicy for it, like some greater purpose theodicy or some soul-making theodicy for it, so that if there is some sort of evil that did occur, then some people will see it as a mechanism for soul-making. But when it comes to like an atheistic worldview, like
let me comment on that real quick before we get to the atheist. Yeah. Let me comment on that real quick before we get to the atheist thing, because this is actually something that bothers me a lot. If the idea here is just to say that the evil or whatever is like required or there's a purpose for it, it's no longer evil. Think about the statement. If evil is something like that should not be done, but it's there for a purpose of the greater good, that means it should be done, right? Because you don't get the metaphysical Allah souffle at the end, right? it's an important ingredient is the evil. You get no souffle, you get no God's plan, you get no greater good without that thing. So it's almost a contradiction to be like, well, it's evil, but it also should occur, right? You got to pick one or the other. And it seems like when you make this move, what I'm pointing out is that there's no evil in the worldview because everything has a purpose, everything has a reason. The evil should occur because it leads to the greater good. It makes no sense for me to say, oh, I led to the greater good today by slapping my wife. And then someone's like, well, that was evil. No, but it led to the greater good. Everyone's going to look at you like, what are you talking about? I mean, we have cases where it makes sense. There's a reason to prick a child to immunize them, to make sure that they don't get vaccine or to get polio. So all things considered, it's a good thing to prick a child. We understand that. But from the theological perspective, you're saying like all this stuff has a reason. And that's just saying that it should occur or that it's good, not evil, right? Because evil doesn't lead to the greater good. Good leads to the greater good.
No, I think I would disagree. If you redefine evil to be something that should not be done, and then say that it is done, then yeah, you've constructed a contradiction. But I think most people would see.
So you don't think that when you talk about moral statements, so you don't think that a law is. So let's take this, like if you do something that's haram, right? You think that you ought not do something haram, right? Under your view.
That's like, for example, it'll be like a prohibition.
Please give me a yes or no. Do you agree with me that if you do something haram, that's something that ought not occur, right? It guides your actions. So it's not the case that I'm constructing something to create a contradiction. I'm working internally with what your view is, right? You're the one who accepts that a law is an action guiding standard, and that we can divide this world where there's things that we should do and things we shouldn't do. The things we shouldn't do are haram. The things that we should do lead us to God or lead us to Allah. And so what I'm saying, the argument goes through, right? Because you're just saying that all things considered, there's some evil thing that serves as a purpose. And when I point out that you agree evil means what shouldn't be done, at least on a broad scale, and good is what means should be done, then you have this contradiction because you're saying the thing that should not be done should be done. It's a clear contradiction.
No, I disagree. For example, like just like the example you gave, which is because you gave the example which at the same time kind of engages with kind of, which is closer to my thinking about, say, pricking a child or having an operation that leads to some sort of pain later on. That's the kind of what I was thinking. That's what I'm saying. Then you agree with me, Adam. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying your view is that view. And sorry, Ben, I'll pass it to you. This bothers me. That is your view. When I gave the analogy that all things considered, right? If I walk up to Ben and I said I pricked a child, he goes, "What the hell? What are you talking about?" I go, "Oh no, hold on. All things considered, it was a good thing." You're like, "What? No, that sounds evil." No, you don't understand. It led to the greater good. I pricked the child because they're going to get immunization from polio. And you go, oh yeah, all things considered, it is a good thing. That's your view. All things considered, evil leads to the greater good. God allows it. God intends for it, right? It has a purpose. It has a reason, right? Tell me how you don't consider the pricking. No, I wouldn't consider the pricking the child as something that shouldn't be done.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But I'm going to give you an example of something
overriding good.
No, but okay. So I'm going to give you an example.
He agrees with the argument. Yeah, just pointing out.
Yeah, but let's put this into a little bit different perspective because maybe you're not understanding. So, I know we talked about cardiac arrest earlier on in this call, in this show, but there was a time when I was an EMT on an ambulance, and we get called to a house for a baby, a 5-month-old baby who died accidentally, complete accident. So the baby was breastfeeding and choked a little bit, died. So nobody did anything wrong. Nobody is at fault for what happened. That baby died. We did CPR, could not get the baby back, had to tell this mother, your 5-month-old baby is dead, is not coming back to life. And that lady had other children in the house. So that 5-year-old kid or 7-year-old kid, they now have to learn that their sibling's dead. And so what of this like you say that there's a purpose for everything. What's the purpose of, and you don't have to know, but like under your framework, that baby's life had a purpose. And maybe its purpose was to just accidentally die and leave the rest of the family with trauma. I don't know. Maybe something good could come of that, but are you going to say that had a specific purpose that needed to happen? Did that baby need to die?
If we consider it from like a divine perspective, there could have been a purpose for it. And
which is kind of messed up if you think about it. So that baby had an existence, had to suffer for whatever stupid point that your deity needed to prove. That baby was the sacrifice in this, and they just got to not exist anymore.
And you literally, that response, you just
no, but you're
no. I'm gonna mute you real quick, Adam. By you saying that there would be a purpose and that quote unquote evil leads to the greater good, and I gave the analogy of the vaccine, and then you denied that. You just admitted that. You were saying all things considered that leads to the greater good. Do I have you right? Am I right about that?
Okay. Do you know what?
Am I? I'm gonna hang up. I am gonna fucking hang up on you if you don't answer me. Did I have that right? Well, we lost Adam. But anyway, I mean, it frustrates me that when someone wants to deny the example that's used, say that in the pricking example that he goes, I agree that wouldn't be evil because the pricking serves to the greater good. Yes, we would say all things considered, it isn't evil. I'm using the analogy to point out that that's your view. Your view is that evil is the pricking, right? And the immunization is the greater good. You're literally saying all things considered, there's no evil. It has a reason, it has a purpose, it has a goal, right? The whole point is to point out there's no evil in your worldview. Or you just have a contradiction because you're saying the thing that should be done is the thing that shouldn't be done. It makes no sense, right? You can't simultaneously have evil and good in the view if evil is the thing that leads to the good, right? That's like the important salt and pepper in your view. But anyway, I digress. Ben, I'm gonna have to drink a cold one after this. I think that's what I have to say. What are your thoughts before we wrap up the live?
Yeah, he definitely wasn't, because we definitely made the point for him, and he just wasn't willing to go with us to acknowledge that, and he is definitely dodging it at the end a little bit. So,
well, we do have one person that waited on for an hour. Let's get them on real quick. Yes, before they're dropped, because I want to be respectful to them. And so apologies, crew or anybody. I want to get this person on just real quick, or viewers, everybody. I want to try to think it's a good question here. It's she, pronouns are they, them. That might be confusing. She, pronouns they, them. All right, I'll have to we'll navigate through this now. US.
Once you hear, yeah. If you knew what my name meant in Japanese, if you knew what my name meant in Japanese, you might not be confused as to why I went with say them.
No worries. Yeah, I don't know any Japanese, so yeah. But yeah, we don't have much time, but yeah, we wanted to get you in real quick and give your concerns, and then.
Right on. I appreciate it. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So what did you have for
my
us?
question is this for the both Dr. Ben and you, Jmike. I'm coming out of my faith, born again Christian, and other. I practice many other world religions as well. But coming out of them intellectually speaking, like I don't see really any reason why any of them should be true intellectually, but having the hard time finding the disconnect when it comes to my emotions. And I was wondering if the both of you, I know you, Jmike, came out of this certain spiritualism, I think maybe, but and I don't not too much about Dr. Ben's upbringing, but if any of the both of you can offer how does one disconnect emotionally after already disconnecting intellectually?
Ben, I feel like your background's more suited. I can kind of give my views, but I think you would be better on
I guess I have a question. Like, when you say that you're still connected emotionally, what does that mean for you?
It means that like for a great I saw a lot of redeemable characteristics and story themes within a lot of the different scriptural tones, not just the Hebrew and the Christian Bible, but like the Tao and Buddhistic scriptures and the Vedas, and then Hindu scriptures, and even the Suras, or certain extent of them. And I felt a certain loyalty to certain different angelic figures and certain different characters within those tones and texts. And I feel like emotionally, if I was to disconnect altogether, like I would lose a certain sense of my own personal loyalty to myself.
So
and like who
from what it sounds like, I don't know if you need to entirely disconnect in that way. Because if you intellectually know that this is, the story isn't true, but I think a lot of us have story characters that we kind of identify with. And when we say identify with, it's not us obviously saying, like, I'm not claiming to be Batman or whoever, but like saying that you see traits in this fictional character that resonate with you, or you say, I want to be like this person, even though they're not a real person. There's still some.
For the record, I'm not trying to be Rasputin. For the record,
you're not trying. You're not trying. But like, I don't think you need to necessarily disconnect that. You can just understand, like, this is a fictional character, but I like the story. This is a meaningful story to me, and I get value out of the lessons I've learned from this story, and I can see myself wanting to embody certain traits of this character in my everyday life. I think that's fine, and I don't think you're irrational for doing that, as long as you understand that you're taking inspiration from fiction.
Exactly. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Would you say there is? Would you say, even though I do find these stories, some of these stories, like to a certain extent, how should I say, fantastic and inspiring, that's not any necessary level of emotional belief or intellectual belief?
I don't. Well, I want to make sure I understand, but the fact that I don't know what you came from. If it was like Christianity or something, I would take it that like someone like scholars even, or like Bart Ehrman and people like that, still have like this emotional kind of attachment, and they grew up in this, and they've been very expressed on how much they love the stories, and they think they're good stories. I think there's ones we could pick out that aren't so great or whatever. But I think I'm with Ben. Like, I don't really see an issue. I think it's kind of expected. Like, I would expect that for people, but I might have that myself, actually, in a sense, where I came from a more spiritual type of background, and philosophy, like, say, views like Platonism, or not substance dualism or idealism, but like property dualism. These types of views have always been attractive to me. And it's probably from like an emotional attachment from kind of my background on it. And I have this intellectual battle in my head of like, oh, well, are there these abstract objects or they're not? And getting this really dumb philosophical weed. But I think I might have a similar thing as you, it sounds like, where there's this kind of emotional attachment, and then I'm fighting with this intellectual side. But it sounds like if that's not like overpowering you, or you can think critically or reserve judgment on things, even though you have that, I feel like you're in a really good place. I'd want to say that about myself, but I don't know. Maybe I'm way off, but yeah, I don't know. But I feel like if I could relate it to me, I feel like that's a healthy thing, or it could be healthy. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
I mean, if you separate that intellectual side, isn't that what matters?
I just didn't want to get caught up in the, like, one thing I was wondering, and I asked the call screen, I was like, do you think they'll call me a believer if I say I still kind of have this emotional connection? Yet
no, I can expect that.
I'm totally disconnected.
Yeah, no, not at all. I don't think it's easy for any of us to judge the kind of process that you went to, accepting, outside of our own, and we can relate those and have some overlapping kind of effects, obviously. But no, I mean, I think that sounds normal to me, so long as you make this if you have this distinction in your head, like there's a proposition like Christianity is true, or whatever you believe prior or something, for anybody, is so long as if you think about that proposition, you say, well, I don't believe it, I'm not saying it's false, maybe, but I don't think it's true. I mean, then you're not a theist, you're not accepting it. And that to me is a very clear indication that if you can feel very confident in saying, I don't accept that proposition, or my attitude towards the proposition, or my belief towards it is that I don't know, or I think it's false. I don't see any problem, because it sounds like the intellectual side's working. You just kind of have these mental events or mental states in your head that are very familiar to you, and they might even be comforting in some ways, you know. So I don't know, but
Right.
I think you ultimately would know that, you know.
No, I think you pinned it down pretty to a T, Jmike. Yeah.
Thanks. I think Ben said way
So
cooler
thank you
stuff
guys
than
for
me.
taking my call, really. Seriously. Yeah, Dr. Ben too. No, Dr. Ben too. Thank you, and thank you guys for taking my call. Very much appreciate it.
For sure. Yeah. We definitely appreciate it, and maybe call back if you get through, I don't know, a different hurdle here, and you say, I thought about this and I believe it's stronger or less. I'd be interested to know where you go from there. But thank you for calling, Shi. We appreciate it. That'll be about it for us, unfortunately. I know maybe there's some people that, like me, when I join live streams, I'm like, just go live forever. Just do it forever. Like, I got nothing to do. Just do it. Come on. But unfortunately, not the case. I'm tired. We're going home. It's bedtime. Ben, do you want to say anything kind of before I get through some studio announcements and things like that?
Not really. It was always fun being on this show, and I was even happier that I got to have a little medical chat with everybody, because it's rare that I get to actually talk about my field. So that was super fun.
I put in the comments when you were in that call, I was just like, I love Ben so much. like Ben's so awesome.
So that's again,
I love having you and Forrest here, just to rescue me at any time. You know, I'm just kidding, but no.
Well, we need more. I mean, I'm not going to say we need everyone to be medical callers, but I do appreciate medical calls. If people want to call into shows that I'm on to ask that's great. But I feel the same way about you and philosophy. Anytime I get a really in-depth philosophy question, I'm like, no, Jmike can take this.
Oh, I'm the brown belt or black belt in word salad. So, but anyway. So, I made a mistake. I had a YouTube video play in the background, and that was very, very disorienting for me. So I apologize, everybody. Let's get through some of the last announcements that I want to say. It was like loud techno music playing in my ear for an ad. So that was interesting. I was like, where'd you go? So I do want to say an in-studio announcement that if you happen to be in the Austin area on May 28th, 2023, we will be broadcasting live from the Free Thought Library. You can join us for Talk Heathen, which will be hosted by Forrest Falkai. And it's a special guest. I believe if you check the Talk Heathen page throughout the week or the website, you can be able to see where that's updated or who that will be. The Atheist Experience will be hosted by Forrest Falkai and Jim Barrows. And the doors will open at noon, and we hope to see you there. Make sure you find a legal parking space and all that jazz. We do want to mention to you that if, like I said, you're in the comments and you want to have it go forever, well, maybe this is a good segue. You can actually watch us 24/7. Might not be, near Ben. It might not be even in the 2000s, maybe, but you can watch it, and it'll be a 24/7 live stream. You just go to the 24/7 AXP TV live stream that you can get at tiny.cc/AXPTV, or you can subscribe to the show and have notifications. Click the channel at any time and you can navigate there and watch it. I do want to remind everybody that the prompt for this week, so in the comments, if you could answer this question, we would really appreciate it, is what do you think is the weirdest prayer God has heard? Ben's was dildo related. And I'd be interested to see if anybody can top that. It'd be interesting. Or actually call in, theist, if you've prayed for your dildos or something. Like, let's go there. Maybe that'll be an interesting call. We can find out that there's someone that really did have this prayer. But please enter your answers into the comment section below the video, and your comment will be read on next week's episode. And yeah, just tune in at the beginning or the second call if it's me hosting it when I do it out of turn. So we do appreciate you, everybody. We love all the support. We love all the theist callers that call in. Still not convinced. We'll still continue to run that intro at the beginning. So hopefully we'll get that. Ben, do you want to sign us off or say anything before before we go?
Giving me all the pressure.
I'm giving it to you.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants more medical rants, we already talked about Talk Heathen. That's where you can normally find me. But otherwise, I love hanging out here on AXP as well. Jmike is great. Call in next week for some more fun. We'll see you all next time.
And check out atheist-community.org, TV at atheist-community.org. Email us. Peace. We love you.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your lies.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.